Hello, good morning. You have been the early work shift. I'm coming a bit later, but I've been working on other things. I just would like to introduce myself. I'm Walter Heun. I'm the director of Joint Adventures and founder of Tanzwerkstatt Europa. So if you have any complaints during your stay here, come to me. If you have any applause to give, good recommendations or whatever, go to all these wonderful ladies here who have been doing hard work to prepare for this. I'm sitting here on a chair because I have this dreadful hobby playing tennis. In between, I just sit at the desk, so I would prefer to sit down with you, but I don't want to give you this performance just at the beginning of the day. So thanks a lot to all of you for coming. I would like to introduce you to Marie Preussler, who is our host here at the Evanson School. She wanted to say some words to you, to welcome you, and later on we can go on with the program.
Hi everyone, I'm Marie. I'm one of the directors of Evanson. Some of you I know, so we have some students from Evanson here as well. Maybe you want to raise your hand, sure.
That's the Evanson corridor. So, well, the name of my lecture is called How Networking Works. This is basically some basic information about maybe how you get out there in the field. And I think a good start is always to know who you're sharing a room with. Yeah. So I thought it would be a good exercise for all of you and a good possibility to get in touch with each other. If each one of you would shortly present yourself and tell people maybe who you are, from maybe in which school or which academy, which university you are working right now. And somebody asked me it would be maybe interesting which cases you're in. I think like, I don't know, whether or not it's a dance formation or a choreography formation or whatever, could be an interesting information for the beginning. Basically, this whole event, Solid Ground Challenging Space, as we call it in total, is an occasion that we created actually after I have been the director of Tanzquartier in Vienna, where I have established a small format called Calibrate, where we had a similar structure with the 3 dance academies in Austria. And this was basically to bring them together with the Viennese dance and performance scene, because there were so many misunderstandings between the people who were organizing the formation and the ones who were doing art, that both felt like they are not preparing for what we want to do. And the other ones said like, okay, but these artists never come to see what we are doing, so how do they know? And therefore we organized this event with only Linz, Salzburg and Vienna. And this was a very good experience. We also had some lectures, mostly from people from Austria, and it was more targeted on Austria. But the interesting thing was that we got a lot of positive reply on that, but the only criticism was if I had only known before, yeah, because we did it with people who just finished their studies and already rent an apartment somewhere and whatever, and suddenly they started thinking differently about what they've been doing. So we felt like it's better to invite people who are still studying, maybe closer towards the end, to create this occasion. I'm quite happy that a lot of fellow colleagues are coming to also give you some input in the coming days. But whenever you have an idea what you want to do here, and it's in our possibilities to organize it, we can also organize it for you. So it's not just for you to be a recipient of something, but you can also take advantage of it and also use it for your own networking. And that's also the reason why we try to organize common lunches and dinners, not just to save money for you, but also that you have an occasion where there's no curriculum, where you can meet your fellow students from other parts of Europe at least, and get in touch with each other, because this is basically a networking event also for you. So also the choreographic processes you're gonna work in are meant as a trigger, so you can see how you to relate to that work. And maybe this can also be a communication starter for you to get in touch with somebody else in this room to start your own collaboration or your own common interest. So maybe we should start with shortly introducing ourselves to each other. My name is Walter Heun from Joint Adventures. I've studied at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, theater sciences, New German literature, and philosophy, and I graduated with a magister, which is nowadays would be a Master of Arts, right? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, but it's a long time ago. Maybe we just start very politically incorrect on the left side with a young man on this side, just for organizational reasons.
So my name is Mateusz. I come from Poland. I graduated National Academy of Theatre Arts in Krakow. I did a master degree there, and then I moved to the Essen to study choreography in the master program. And I also, was my last semester, so I graduated right now. It's my graduation event now. So yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Super.
Hi, I'm Heun. I'm studying.
Can you try to speak up a little so that the people back there also hear you?
Okay. I'm Hubert, and I'm from Poland, and I'm studying in theater.
Wonderful. Super, thanks a lot. So what I can figure out geographically, there seems to be a Polish corner here. There seems to be an Ivanson corridor here, HCT Island over there, and the Vienna kind of corner over there. That's very normal in the beginning. When you start to get out, you're looking for the people you feel most comfortable with, and that's the people you know already. And maybe at the end of the 5 days, we could be able to do an introduction like this again, and suddenly you would be all mixed, and you would find out that there are people out there you can also affiliate with. So my little lecture is called How Networking Works. I do this on purpose as the opening of this series of lectures. I think you have a full program in your little bags, and also you got it beforehand. So there will also be people who give you some very practical, down-to-earth information about residency spaces in Europe, about production, about maybe how to write applications or whatsoever, and get your things done. I myself want to concentrate a little bit more on some principles. So I try, even though it's some time ago when I was in that situation, I try to imagine how your situation is in your university, in your academy right now, or if you're trying to reconsider it yourself a little bit, the situation you're in. Of course, you had I'm sure, quite a difficult year the last year since the Corona lockdown, having a lot of training at home, having to depend a lot on yourself, on your own motivation, but also then possibly slowly going back into live presence in your academies. And as a matter of fact, this is a situation which is very unusual for all of us. But on the other hand, if you think about your situation in your academy, it's normally rather protected. I mean, there are some people who think about your schedule. They are making proposition what you should train, which artist you should be working with. In some places you have a possibilities to select yourself. In other places, you're being told what's the schedule for the next week. But as a matter of fact, it's a quite protected area because you have a system that you've found that maybe you thought about when you were choosing your dance formation. But there's space available. There's somebody taking care for the heating. Mostly it's clean, hopefully. And there will be situations like, I don't know, somebody's doing a piece with you, choreographer's coming, you have an artistic experience with people. And as a whole, it's protected because you've got the space. There is an institution that got the money to run the space. And if you want to do a piece or want to start a collaboration with, there are also other artists around you that you could ask and do something with them because you're all studying. So it's also easy to find access to people to collaborate with. So the next step might be to think about an aspect that you should reflect when you're going out. I call that Orientation 1. And Orientation 1 has a title called Find Yourself. So when you're thinking about networking, the most important thing is, of course, to know your own skills. So, and I'm not saying skills just in terms of what you can do in terms of performative skills, in terms of techniques, in terms of capabilities as a dancer or ideas, means you have, information you have as a choreographer that you might want to become. But it's also about thinking about your own skills in a way about your personality. So maybe you should ask yourself, am I a communicative person? Yeah, because nowadays in an artistic practice, it's very important to have a so-called idiosyncratic work. So when you want to position yourself as a creative artist, as a choreographer in the field, it's important to, I don't know, get aware of what it really is you want to be working on. But as a step before that, the questioning yourself, am I really a communicative person, would maybe give you some help also to think about your potential ways of networking, because not everybody is a communicative person. So not everybody can stand here and say something to an audience of 30 or maybe 300 people. So try to reflect that, because this is also a skill that you might need when you want to establish as a choreographer. Another question would be like, do I speak languages? Yeah, and which languages? Because your possibilities, your abilities to communicate will maybe determine where you want to go. I mean, starting somewhere because you like the artists there and you think you can develop in a community, and not knowing the language will create barriers for you. If you're somebody who learns languages quickly, maybe not so strongly, but I think these are some preconditions you should think about. Also, the question, am I afraid of flying, maybe will not be as important anymore, because many festivals, many organizations try to ask artists for ecological reasons to go by trains. But if you go by trains, you will spend more money. I can tell you from my personal experience that I know dancers who have never dared to dance with a big company because they were afraid of flying. And they thought like, okay, if I'm dancing with a company like, let's say, Rosas, you might know, they will tour like crazy and you will spend a lot of time in airplanes. So that would be just to trigger your own thought process, some ideas how you could think about yourself, your own human skills. On the other hand, it's important to think about how you see yourself. Do you want to be a choreographer? Do you think like you have choreographic skills? Do you see yourself more as a dancer? Do you see yourself as a person that is and wants to work very self-determined? Or do you see yourself more as someone who would be interpreting ideas of others? I mean, the process of creating is very different nowadays in contemporary dance, as we all know. So the pure interpretation is maybe something that is not being asked so much anymore, at least in the independent scene or in ensembles, in state and civic structures or larger structures. But of course, there is still this system where you can just work as an interpret. Are you somebody who prefers working in a smaller team of artists rather than being part of a larger company? I think all these considerations you should have yourself in order to really find the place where you want to be later on. I hope in the lecture of John Ashford on Sunday, we at least asked him to give you a little bit of a description, because he's running Aerowaves, was one of the most spread out networks in the performing arts, and he sees like 600 videos every year of almost every artist who's fresh and new in Europe. So he can also describe you a little bit how the dance looks like in different corners, at least of this continent, maybe also worldwide. But maybe you should prepare your questions for him to think like, okay, if I'm this kind of person, where you would recommend me to go? Where is the scene I could possibly want to work with? So also an important question is, do you want to work in a more hierarchic or non-hierarchic setting? You know, maybe we would all agree that it's more appreciable to work in a non-hierarchic setting, but non-hierarchic setting means also that you have to take a lot of responsibilities yourself. Maybe you're not the person for that. Maybe you like being instructed and being told where to go. Another important question, I think, is the question, do you prefer financial safety for your life, or do you prefer independence? Yeah. There's an artist who once said to me, Armin Wölfel from Neuer Tanz, because he was being perceived as one of the most difficult and selective artists in Germany at this time. And he said, as an artist, you always have the right to say no. Yeah? You don't have to do everything. And the funny thing was, because he so often said no, he got better and better offers. Because he said, no, I will not accept this, because this is not the conditions I want to work in. And in the beginning, there was a rumor going around like, oh, he's a really tough guy, he's really difficult. But then he was also able to produce his performances in a way that you could see like he caused that difficulties because he's so precise in his work. And from that kind of bad rumor, it changed in a very good one. So saying no doesn't necessarily mean that you will not be accepted by people, but you maybe position yourself better. So, and then of course, the question, are you more the kind of person who wants to settle somewhere? Or do you want to be constantly moving? Do you want to accept a life as a nomad? That's one of the crucial questions that you should ask yourself. Also from personal experience, I can tell you this also will change. Maybe you're not thinking about families yet, but as soon as you will have a young person coming up in your life or in yourself, I can tell you this will change your life completely and your attitude towards life. So all these questions will have an implication on your career, But it will also have an implication on your conditions of living. And you can be sure, as I just said, about maybe once having babies, these situations will always change. And there's nothing as constant as change. So I'm saying this to also, I imagine, since you're not my age group, that of course a lot of things might already have changed in your lives. And sometimes change is being perceived as being difficult. I can tell you, when I once stood in my living room and I thought like, oh my God, is this going to be my life now? I will constantly do this summer festival, Tanzwerkstatt Europa, nothing in between. And yeah, everything's settled. So, oh my God, this is gonna be boring. Yeah. A year after my relationship split up, there was an offer from Vienna. I moved to Vienna. I've had 7 removals within 2 years with my office, with my private apartments, and with the apartments of my families. So you wouldn't imagine how much change you can accept in the age of 40 something. Yeah. So change is something that, of course, if it's forced, often feels awkward, but it can also bring you towards new ways of thinking. I founded my company, Joint Adventures, because I was the managing director of Tanztendenz München, which was the local organization. We have some nice studio spaces. I found the spaces. I co-founded the whole thing, but my boss were 5 choreographers, and you can imagine 5 choreographers always disagree on things. So, and they constantly agreed or disagreed on the question whether or not I should still do the job. So, and after some point, I got some really tough resistance. So they didn't want to accept me to organize a nationwide festival in Germany. And they found that a very bad idea. So I thought, like, I find it a good idea. And because I had that resistance, I needed to change it. And I founded my own company, Joint Adventures. And now I'm happy to have done that. Maybe I would still run around discussing with 5 choreographers whether or not we buy a coffee machine or such important questions. So this was a forced change, but at the same time, it offered new possibilities. So orientation phase 2, I would call look around. So when you're there, of course, you already know quite some people, but there are a lot of people out there you might want to collaborate with. You don't know yet. So the most important thing to start your networks, also internationally, maybe one day worldwide, is to look at the people who are just around you and to think about those people if you want to realize first projects. So who are the people around you want to realize something with? Yeah, maybe as a performer, maybe with your own artistic ideas to find people, because the people around you are basically in the same situation. Yeah, because nobody's pouring jobs at you when you're coming out of a university. So maybe it's good to look at the resources you've given in your place. And it's also important to think about what are the resources you're looking for. Yeah? So are you looking for a job? Are you looking for a space to do something? Are you looking for money to realize a larger project already? Who could be your potential artistic partners? So try to get aware of how you see yourself when you're finishing university. And of course, it's important to see what are the facilities that are available for your work right now. If you want to do a first piece, where's a studio space? But facilities also means, like, I don't know, who could do your costumes, where you can get some money to provide needs for a first piece, or I don't know, get a scholarship to travel somewhere because you you want to experience something new, or you want to meet people elsewhere. So, but what's available right now around you? And which ones could you most possibly get? The world is full of people who write applications to funding bodies or funding schemes where you can tell from the scratch they will never get it because they have not the track record yet, work history, or because it's the wrong source you might be applying for. And I guess even more important is the question, who are the potential people in your local ambient, in your local scene, who could bring you in touch with others internationally and nationally? Your first source for communicating you as an artist and what you want to do as an artist are the people around you. Yeah. Maybe you have institutions in your country like, I don't know, an archive, an information center. You have producers, festival organizers, but also your teachers. You cannot imagine. Sometimes your teachers have connections you wouldn't believe. Yeah, I mean, why not asking them and with the questions that are burning to you in your situation, and try to ask them to create a connection for you. But ask yourself, what could be their reason to do so, not yours? Because very often you get propositions of people who say like, yeah, I need to do this project and I need this and that. Yeah. And you ask yourself as somebody who is being asked, yeah, but why do you ask me? And what is my role in this? So when we have discussed with the European Dance House Network that I had the pleasure to co-found and be its president for a while, we spent some time thinking about our mission statement. And one of the most important sentences we created there was, create more relevance through involvement. So if you're involving other people in your plans, you create more relevance for yourself and for your plans and for the output of your plans, because they will make it their own case if you share it with them rather than just demand. And of course, the one question would possibly be, and my list of questions is never complete, so you might have a lot other questions to yourself. But one question that I would find crucial is, what is it that makes you special? You know, but not special in a sense of an anticipated role you should possibly play, but just think about yourself, trying to define yourself. And your definition of yourself will change. But if you know who you are, yeah, you can more easily define what you want. And as a tennis trainer once said to me, he said, like, you have the technique, yeah, you have the skills. The only thing you need to know is to where you want to put the ball and which curve it should be taking. Yeah. This changed my way of playing tennis. Maybe in a dance context, this is not so important, but this idea of thinking about the ball, where it should go, and the pathway it should take is often more important than trying to, I don't know, figure out on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm 90% of this, 20% of this. This maybe doesn't bring you any further. But to reflect on yourself, where you want to go, and which pathway you want to take. Oops. So I basically said that to tell you, your first network are the people around you. Also the people around you in this space. It's the people you are in class with, the ones you meet here. It's your local teachers, the administrators, arts organizers, people working in institutions, agents, or the people you meet in the lobby, in the foyer. Sometimes I was really surprised. I met somebody in the lobby once when I was working in Lucerne in Switzerland. I met a guy who had multiple sclerosis, and he was lame from the head downwards. And after a while, I went to him and I said, like, hey, apologies for this question, but I'm so surprised that you, as somebody being not able to move, why you constantly come and see dance performances? Yeah. And the answer was breathtakingly simple. Because he said, you know what? I'm coming here because when I'm seeing them dancing, yeah, I'm dancing with them. Yeah. And because he gave me that answer, we started a conversation and we met more and more often. And after a while, I found out he was an important artist in Switzerland, a very rich person. And suddenly he became our funder, which wasn't my purpose. I just had an interest in this kind of personal situation he was in. But he became a funder, and I wouldn't have believed it. So once my first sponsor I found because I met someone at a party, and we had a conversation, and she said, like, well, I'm taking on a new job with a company called Digital Equipment, who is a specialist in computer networking, and I'm gonna work in the communications department. And we had a very nice conversation. I told about a networking project I wanted to do. And half a year later, she called me and said, like, yeah, I moved to the sponsoring department, and I remembered our conversation at this party. And she said, can we collaborate? And this way I found my first sponsor. It's always nice if you get this kind of lectures and people tell you, if you want to find a sponsor, you have to do this, this, and that, and you have to present your work yourself like this. I can tell you, in the field of arts, the most sponsors come because they're personally interested in. Yeah, it's not the big things we can offer in terms of numbers, figures, and communication points. It's the interest we can trigger. So you might meet people somewhere in the lobby, in the foyer, or wherever. I'm not telling you this to run around to constantly think, who could I use for which reason? Yeah. But try to be aware of this, because people will also recognize if you just try to build a career. Yeah, and they all have context, working relationships on various layers. And always be aware of the fact that you possibly will meet them twice. Yeah. So, when I started out, in 1990, I did a feasibility study, a study on the situation of dance formation in Germany. And I had some partners in the boat. And after sometimes we disagreed on things. Yeah. And when it happened for the third time that they tried to change everything behind my back, I was a young, very dynamic person, so I put my fist on the table and said, "You're idiots, I don't want to work with you anymore." I mean, I'm cutting it short, the speech was longer. Okay, this was very good for myself emotionally. As a matter of fact, one of the two persons I had a complaint with later on became the director of the German Cultural Foundation, handing out 40 million euros a year. I didn't know then, yeah. Luckily, I met her 5 years later and we sorted out our problem. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ever been able to apply to the German Cultural Foundation. So this happens not with everybody, but it happens that you meet the same people twice. So I developed as a philosophy for my life to always treat people in a polite way, even if I disagree with people. So The world outside of the protected space of an academy, it's a struggle for resources. Artists are fighting for space, money, recognition, visibility. It's, how to say, it's a well, in America, when people teach their children, the first thing they say to their children, you know what, when you go out there, nobody waited for you, so you have to fight for your development yourself. In Germany, I would say people are kind of, we have this kind of thing called pampers, so you're pampering your children, you try to create all possible ways to do it. So there are very different ways of thinking how you could develop. But there always is a shortage of space, money, recognition, and visibility. You wouldn't believe it, how much you can discuss also with very important, very well-known artists that they don't feel enough visible yet. And people where you think like, well, they have reached their goal are still feeling, but there are other people who got more recognition than myself. I'm lacking a good working rehearsal space. I'm lacking a manager or whatsoever. So that's something you should think of. Then the access to people and availability of those people. So where and how can you meet people that can bring you further? Where can you get in touch with people who are in charge or in control of resources? If you have a similar experience that I had in the very beginning, I felt like it's very difficult to find your orientation and to know how can I approach those people. Yeah? They're mostly sitting somewhere in an office. They're always busy in a schedule because every organization is demanding more and more of the people working there. So there's more and more responsibilities people are having, less and less time. So that's something you should think of. I can tell you later on a bit more about that. Then there's the question, competition versus collaboration. Yeah? Often when we see dance films, we learn that if you're just the most eager one and the toughest one and you're training harder and you jump wider than the other ones, you will make it. My experience is totally different. Collaboration is what brings you further. This artist I was talking about said this wonderful sentence to me once. He said, the artist is the natural enemy of the other artist because we are constantly in battle around the resources like visibility, acknowledgement, and so on. I would strongly oppose. What brings you further is collaboration. And also, if you feel like you have more to offer in a collaboration than the other person, the other person might bring something in that you cannot provide. Even their questions bring you further. So I would always invite you to be please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something on this. Can I do it?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just like talking recently on the same topic, and one person gave a super nice example that like when you are children and you know that some other child also like to play the same games or exploring the same topics, you want to play together with this child and you want to do it together. But this capitalistic system made us that now, if we know that some other artists working the same topic, we're like, oh no, they're gonna like take our resources. And it's not in the human nature, because if you know someone is developing and working on the same, like our nature is to try to find out what's there, not to kind of close and try to be faster. So I really love this example because it's like this, it's just the system which makes us to compete.
That's absolutely right. If you're thinking about the field of arts, yeah, it's not only a struggle for the ideas. It's not only a kind of trying to position yourself as an artist next to other artists. You might want to call that then an artistic discourse, an overlaying artistic dialogue that is within a certain scene, or in the world of dance, or between different art forms. It is always there. But this dialogue also means it's connected to this artistic developments. There is a how to say, like a struggle between job opportunities, employment markets, financial resources, because they might shift. If a certain tendency in dance will shift, you know, they will look for another type of dancers. In the early years of 2000, there were critics who said, like, there's this juxtaposition between the conceptual dance and the dance. I mean, these terms are both terrible, as if a conceptual artist couldn't work with movement, or as if it wasn't a conceptual reflection on how you want to work with movement and what could be your idiosyncratic way of working with it, or how you could think about your own movement technologies, your own idea of which bodies you want to work with. There are so many ways to conceptually reflect on the moving body that this juxtaposition doesn't really work. On the other hand, an artist who is conceptual, where you don't obviously see so much running around and jumping around, is not necessarily a non-dance artist like they were perceived at that time. But maybe this process is important to also get the audience dancing a bit more. So, but these developments have influence on the job markets and on the possibilities for you as artists. And this is nothing bad, because we are constantly challenging each other to go further, to think further about the possibilities of the art form we are working in. But at the same time, we always have to stay fresh and alert. And when I organized this meeting on dance formation in the 90s, there were some people from the ballet world and said, you know, but the ballet technique is the basis for everything. Yeah? And there were others like Dieter Heidkamp, you might know from Frankfurt, who was still then a choreographer with Tanzfabrik Berlin, said like, but you know, there's this example of Kazuo Ono, who turned something like 80 then, and he said like, he has the principle of lifelong learning. And this is the principle I would strongly recommend to you. We used to have people who've left their dance formation and said like, I'm a finished dancer now. You're never finished. You're a lifelong transition process. That's what I want to say. So what do I want to say? Or I call the paragraph, how to get there. Well, be aware you're not the only one. Other question? Yes? You want to keep your style? Yes.
And there's a trend also, and like every dance is kind of like same style sometimes. And I feel like it's also a bit hard to be alert all the time with the fresh things. And like, this is like my sense.
Yes.
Like in the school,
Actually, for a choreographer, it's also, at one point, he or she will be confronted with the question, do I still want to make art? Or do I want to maintain my style and be successful? Yeah, because at some point you will be asked to repeat the same thing again and again, you know. And as soon you try something different as a choreographer and you don't provide what presenters expect you to provide. I don't know. Wim van de Cabo is coming next week. Yeah. For many times he tried to do something differently. He was always forced again into this kind of animalistic physical style. Your dancers are not moving, they're just talking. No, not so good. I prefer the other piece. You know, there's nobody saying, Wim, we want you to do the same thing again and again, but there is this kind of, how do you say, this kind of normative drive in the setting that is there. Some venues ask for, I don't know, for pieces that are attracting a larger audience. Therefore, they are pushing the artist to go on in the same line. So I'm not saying, I mean, an Austrian artist, a fine artist once said to another artist that I heard, are you still an artist or are you already selling work? You know, this is the extreme of that line. So that means I think you should try to keep aware of where the field is shifting and to always position yourself or question yourself in relation to the surroundings. And of course, the selection to which place you want to go, to which city you want to go once you've finished university, I think you should do that reflection beforehand. Yeah. Because I had people, from the Evanson School years ago, people who finished school already 3 years ago, they came to me and said like, yeah, I finished my school and then I went to Berlin and I found out I'm a very good dancer, but nobody needs that in Berlin because they are only conceptual there. Yeah. So I asked her, what do you want to do? Yeah, I want to be in a company, I want to earn some money, but it doesn't need to be the cutting edge art that I'm doing. So I asked her, why didn't you think about going to Switzerland? Because there are artists who get money. Maybe they are not always on the top ranking in the international arts magazines, but they can pay for artists and the fee level is much higher than in Berlin, where there are 40,000 artists struggling for very little funds. But of course, Berlin is a more interesting city if you are into the development of the art form and you want to discuss with people in the surroundings, see a lot of work. I mean, that's also important. Where do you see a lot of work without having to travel all the time? Yeah, I mean, Vienna is a good place since I see you sitting there because there is this substantial funding system and there are lots of organizations presenting international work. So yes, some considerations you should have. Yes, go ahead.
Do you have some tips on how to best observe how the field is shifting? Like some kind of methods of observation, like to get the bigger picture?
I didn't really understand what you mean with method.
We were talking about how to observe how the field is shifting, how the trends are shifting. Like
Okay. This is basically
some tips on how to best observe that.
to better serve that.
How to observe that. Observe.
So if I got it right, because there's a machine running and I have a little tone in my ear since a couple of years. So your question was about whether or not we could provide some information about where there are certain scenes. Was that the question, or?
No,
So I come closer.
yeah, I will try to talk louder. So we were talking about to observe how the field is shifting, how
Yes.
the different trends are coming and going. So I wanted to ask you if there are ways to do it like best, how to get a bigger picture of what
Okay.
is in trend now, what is happening.
Yes, yes. Well, I think it's easier now than it was when I started out, because at the time when I started out, there was no internet. Meanwhile, you can see such a lot of things on the internet. And when you're considering to go somewhere, they are mostly, at least in the more in the countries that develop more like cultural support system or something like that in terms of funding and so on. There are often so-called dance information centers in Lithuania, in Finland, in Sweden. You always find that. So you can go there and have a look at videos, how the artistic scene is producing there. This will give you a first overview on what's happening where. I mean, we invited John also for Sunday to give you a broader sight. Last year, the lecturer for this topic didn't show up on short notice because she had to finalize an EU report. So I improvised a little bit by putting on the cliches of the dance in certain regions, and people were invited to oppose me. This was a very lively discussion, because also from very different points of view, the scenes also look differently. So there is not a formula like, okay, this is the way you have to do it, and this counts for everyone. There are different possibilities. If you have already contacts in the city, I think I would talk to these people. There are dance information centers. We will collect also a list and send you later on a list of some we can easily identify. So when you're going home, you will get a link list from us, also with some recommendations that other lecturers give. So that you can have a look at this. Of course, to get an overview about what's happening where in Munich, in Europe or in the world is extremely difficult. Yeah, because it's a lifetime job. I myself see, like in regular times, like 200 pieces on stage per year. Yeah, and I know that other colleagues are doing this as well. So this is a way you can get an overview. So that's also a reason why I say try to find the people close to you to ask for recommendation. And your first overview you can get if you go on that websites and try to see how's the dance in Norway, Sweden, Finland. You can get it from Switzerland, you can get it from Germany, you can get it from Berlin. There is an organization called Tanztanz München where you can get it from Munich. So there are so many things available on the internet for a first insight. But of course, that's maybe what I would like to talk further on. There are different ways of getting into it, yeah? And that's not so easy if you don't know anybody in the beginning. So my recommendation would be find the people and places who suit to your plans, yeah, by doing investigations like that, and your ideas. And try to find those people first rather than spamming the world with information that's not being asked for. Yeah. So I often get emails, and I know many colleagues get that from artists who want to show a first piece or present themselves as dancers. I, as a festival organizer, get emails from dancers who want to have a job. Yeah, in a company, and I asked myself, why me? Why did I get this email? Why not somebody who runs a company? So I think that's important, because we are all getting so much information that it's very important to get personalized information rather than being spammed with unpersonal information. If you want to be understood and appreciated, try to understand and appreciate first what your future partners are doing. So it's important to also do some research on somebody you want to approach before you approach them, because since everybody is more and more busy on this planet, I feel like the time when they are open for a new proposition is getting more and more limited. So in this time, the information should be valuable in a way, and as we said before, create more relevance through involvement, it's also easier to find partners that you showed interest in before you want them to get interested in your work. A little example here. When I was starting to network myself internationally, I met two people. One was called Bob Palmer, who was doing the European Capital of Culture Festival in Glasgow at that time, which was a huge event, and Rose Fenton, who was the director of the London International Festival of Theatre. And I was a young guy from Germany who had just tried to settle his projects and meet international colleagues, and I happened to have a lunch break with them. So I thought, like, how can I tell them about my project? And they asked me about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the German reunification. And instead of talking about my projects, we only talked about this, the whole time. And they were so surprised that a young guy from Germany who was born after the wall has been built said, like, for me it's not a reunification, for me it's a new country joining another country. And we had an interesting conversation about this topic. And of course, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a historian, I'm not a scientist of politics. So I talked from my personal point of view. And they found it interesting enough. So after that, we had more contact. And at some point, I also could propose my project. So I think often it's more important to have a first positive communication rather than addressing all your needs and demands right away. There's a very nice, workbook on how you can network in Europe with presenters, and this book is called "It Starts with a Conversation." And then later on you can maybe even develop a friendship and have more in-depth collaboration. So maybe also building links through the people you know already to others is important. So, for example, when I was the producer of Rosemary Butcher, I don't know if you know her, she just died recently, but she's one of the most important figures in British dance. And Rosemary was being perceived in Britain as being a difficult artist. So I started working with her and tried to establish her work more internationally. So the first thing I thought about is, who are the colleagues who could possibly be interested in her work? And I approached the ones that I thought are the most safe choices as the first ones. So if you want to get things done, try to find the easiest partners first, because then you have already a small alliance that can support you when you try to get in under others. So at that time, I was a producer here in Munich. There was a director in Tanzquartier in Vienna that was newly founded then, and I knew she was interested in the last work she had seen from her. So I gave her a call and said, like, do you want to co-produce? I convinced Sigrid Gareis, who was then the director of Tanzquartier in Vienna, and at that time it was a very important partner. So others joined in because they wanted to be associated with that partner. You would be surprised what the motivations for people are to join your project, which has nothing to do with what you're doing. So also this can be an interesting tool. So you are at the beginning of your career. I would recommend ask for advice rather than presenting yourself. You wouldn't imagine how many people are out there, including myself, who you can pay with a currency you wouldn't imagine. And the currency is your attention. So there are so many experienced people out there who are perfectly happy if a young person is asking them for advice, because they feel honored and privileged that somebody has interest in what they have been doing and what they have achieved. So you would be surprised how many people would spend even an hour with you if you just ask them for advice for a specific question. So not for an open question like, how the hell should I find my way as an artist, or what is out there in the field? So try to think about the questions that really bother you, and try to address those questions to the people you would expect an answer from. Many collaborations that I started with artists asking myself, and then after a while I asked back, and what are you doing? And then they presented themselves. I had conversations with agents who said, like, this is a roster of artists you must have seen. Yeah? And immediately you feel like, how do you know? Yeah? How do you know what I'm doing? And then you look at the roster of the artist and you think, like, there's no one that interests me. Thank you. So the way you start that conversation is very important for the way it can possibly continue. Also, be aware of the right momentum. What I learned is that sometimes if it's the right momentum, it just needs a little push to get things done. If it's the wrong momentum, yeah, you can use all your energy to bang against doors that will stay closed, yeah, because it's not the right momentum. And this is the most difficult thing in life, I think, to find out. But it has to do something with, I don't know, awareness of also like seeing yourself in consideration or in reflection to the setting you're in. Yeah? If you, for example, see a very important choreographer you want to dance with, and you see like he's just at a premiere party and 15 people are approaching him, somebody wants to get an interview, and some people want to say, I want to book your show. That's not the right moment to say, do you have a job for a dancer? But if you're going somewhere to festivals or to other events like, Tanzwerkstatt Europa here, like Impulstanz in Vienna, Tanz im August in Berlin, or Kunst und Festival des Arts, or you go to a national dance platform that exists almost everywhere in Europe. Many artists think, this is just for presenters and artists are not being asked. But you wouldn't believe how much time they have to hang out after the shows. Yeah? Nobody's there. In their offices, they are busy from, 8 o'clock in the morning until late at night. Yeah? And all their people in their team ask them questions, so they get crazy. And if you're calling and saying, like, I have a question for some advice how I could develop as an artist in my career, they will have no time. But they're hanging out. They have no family life. They have no employees to deal with. And maybe also sometimes they feel lonely and they enjoy to have a conversation with somebody they don't know and they have a new input from. So this is something I would anyway recommend if you can afford to travel or get a little grant. If you're interested in a certain region, look for the platforms they have there, because this gives you an overview about what's happening there. All the artists are going to be there, all the presenters, everybody who's involved in the scene will be at those platforms, and they will also have maybe time to set for coffee, or there are meeting places where you can go. See performances, yeah? See performances, because only if you're knowing what's happening out there, you can have something to discuss with people. And also, it's not so clever if you're thinking that your work is the most interesting one, not knowing what else is out there. Yeah? So take advantage of public talks. If you find a person that is giving a lecture, talk to that person afterwards and connect with a question and say, like, okay, you said something interesting. Can I ask you something about this? So what would that mean for my personal situation I'm just having. Yeah. So that's the kind of settings where you can more easily get access. It's not only the work you're doing that will bring you further, it's also important to reflect on the process, how to get there. So, I think that's my last paragraph because you might be very hungry already. How to become a happy artist. So, there are some people, often it's critics who have nothing to do with art, who think art is suffering. Yeah. You have to work harder than anybody else, and you have to live in very bad working conditions, earn little money, because then you are more creative. No, I wouldn't say so. Maybe some people need that. I don't see it as a principle. I think it's important to enjoy the process you are in and do your best to make it successful and pleasant. Yeah. So, I don't know, when you're starting to work as a performer, there might be artists who know already that it's easier to get students from who just graduated for their first works because all the others know already it's no fun to work with them. Yeah? There are these people around who cannot pay you properly or whatever. I can tell you, even if you have the bad advantage to meet one of these people, it's still very important to do the best you can to make it a success and to find your pleasure in it. I'm not telling you to be a stupid dancer, to shut up and do what you're being asked for. But I try to convince you that even in this situation, it's better to find your pleasure and try to do your best to make it a success, even if you see that it's gonna be a dreadful production. I feel ashamed on stage if I have to do that. I mean, you have to be always clear about your personal limits. You know, there are also some presenters who sell your first body, which is still young and beautiful to watch. So there are also people around who try to use that in order to create their own successes, or whatever you think will go beyond your limits. I'm not saying forget about this. I'm just saying if you are in a process and you see it's ending at a certain time, try to find your pleasure in it, because if you're doing it with more pleasure, you're going to be more successful. And even the people you're working with, they have contacts to others who might block your career if you're, I don't know, spreading out mostly negative energy. Another little example or a little idea of how things in my perspective work. It's a very common sentence to say life is a pathway, yeah? But life is a pathway that's completely meandering. Is this an English word? I don't know. But it's going here and there. But nevertheless, you follow a pathway. And along your pathway, there are doors going to be opening here and there, not always. And maybe also not always in the right moment for what you think is your plan. But if this door is opening, you have to see what is behind that door, and you have to decide whether or not you go through. But once you decide to go through, you go. And you go to the very end of that space, yeah? And you go for it with pleasure and with all your dedication, yeah? Even if it's the wrong space, yeah? Because at the end of the space, you might find another door where you can go further. The most difficult thing you can do, or the most unhealthy thing you can do, is stand in the doorway and think for a long time whether or not you should enter or you should go back to the corridor, yeah? So There's this famous American actor. I don't know if if it's still correct to quote him. It's Bing Crosby. Nevertheless, he said something interesting. He said, "I don't know the way to success, but trying to please everyone is the safe way to not having success." And John Lennon, who is still one of my favorite artists, maybe not so much in your generation, but he's also famed for that quote that's not necessarily from him. And he says, "Life is what's happening while we are making other plans." So it's good to have plans, but it's very important to be able to adjust it. Because scientific studies have proved that the happiest people on the planet are the ones who set their goals and strive hard to reach them, but who are able as well to realize when they will not reach them, and they have the capability to readjust their goals. So the world of dance is full of people who have been banging against doors which never opened, and became frustrated because they felt like this is the door I have to go through. Yeah. There's an example that John Ashford told me once when he was organizing the Spring Collection, which was one of the first national dance platforms for international presenters. He presented a then young company there for a couple of times called Adventures in Motion Pictures. And they have been presented 2 or 3 times in these platforms. There were 200 European arts presenters coming, and they didn't get a single invitation. So I know many artists who would complain about the organizer, about the stupid arts promoters who were sitting in the audience not understanding their art, but they were clever enough to ask John Ashford, "John, what do you think, why nobody's booking us?" And John said, "Well, maybe your work is not for that arty-farty Euroclash presenter scene that's coming here. Yeah? Maybe you should do something different. Maybe you should do something more commercial." So the same company that was unsuccessful in this target group decided, and the choreographer is called Matthew Bourne, he decided later on to do a Swan Lake for 24 men, and it became one of the most successful commercial dance productions in Britain. This guy is meanwhile one of the most accepted, most honored artists in Britain. He's one of the richest persons in the dance field because he was able to readjust his plans and see, okay, there's a field I'm striving for, but I will not reach that goal because my work will not communicate, so maybe I should do something about my work. And I don't know, maybe he's also a happy person now. So in that sense, become a happy artist. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thanks a lot. This is just the beginning to trigger yourself a little bit. Look around and try to meet people you don't know. Maybe you better spend time with the people who are not from your city than the other ones. So thanks a lot and enjoy your 5 days. Make the best out of it.